Tonight, Dylan's Radio Theater presents two short stories by O. Henry. I'm your host, Craig K. Dillon. The first is Gift of the Magi, a story of love, sacrifice, and quiet irony, one of the most enduring pieces of American short fiction. The second is Romance of a Busy Broker, lighter in tone, faster in pace, built on misunderstanding rather than loss. Two stories, the same author, very different turns of the human heart. We begin with Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87, that was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved one and two at a time by bulldozing the grocer and vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with a silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87. The next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, taking a look at the home, a furnished flat at $8 a week. It did not exactly beg a description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendicancy squad. In the vestibule below was a letterbox into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was paid $30 per week. Now when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in the gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she only had $1.87 from which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she'd calculated. They always were. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Many happy hours she spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you've seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin, agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly. Her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, there were 2 possessions of James Dillingham Young's in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's, and the other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day and to dry just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a moment and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Mademoiselle Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked at Sofronie. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hash metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, purely properly proclaiming its value by substance alone and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather straps that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work, repairing the ravages made by the generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror carefully and critically. Oh, if Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I'll look like a Coney Island chorus girl. What could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat in a corner of the table near the door as he always entered. Then she heard his steps up the stairway. Down the first flight, she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying little prayers about the simplest everyday things. Now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow. He was only 22, and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that he could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, not surprise, not disapproval, not horror, nor any of the sentiment that she had been prepared for. He just simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling, don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through another Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas. And let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You cut off all your hair?" asked Jim, laborious as if he had not arrived at that patient fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said with an air of almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me. For it went for you. Maybe the hairs on my head were numbered. She went on with sudden serious sweetness. But nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put on the chops, Jim? Out of the trance, Jim seemed to quickly to wake. He unfolded his Della for 10 seconds. Let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year, what's the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not moving them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. Don't make any mistake, Dell, he said, about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that can make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going for a while at first. White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy. And then, alas, a quick feminine change to historical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the Lord of the Flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped for long in the Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up at her dim eyes and smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up with like a little singed cat and cried, "Uh-oh." Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash in reflection with the reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I wanted to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use just as present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in the last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that all those who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as these are the wisest. Everywhere they are the wisest. They are the Magi. And now for the second story by O. Henry, The Romance of a Busy Broker. Pitcher, confidential clerk of the office of Harvey Maxwell, broker, allowed a look of mild interest and surprise to visit his usually expressionless countenance when his employer briskly entered at 9:30 in company with his young lady stenographer. With a snappy "Good morning, Pitcher," Maxwell dashed at his desk as though he were intending to leap over it, and then plunged into the great leap of letters and telegrams waiting there for him. The young lady had been Maxwell's stenographer for a year. She was beautiful in a way that was decidedly unstenographic. She forewent the pomp of an alluring pompadour. She wore no chains, bracelets, or lockets. She had not the air of being about to accept an invitation to luncheon. Her dress was gray and plain, but it fitted her figure with fidelity and discretion. In her neat black turban hat was the gold green wing of a macaw, On this morning, she was softly and shyly radiant. Her eyes were dreamily bright, her cheeks genuine peach blow, her expression a happy one, tinged with reminiscence. Pitcher, still mildly curious, noticed a difference in her ways this morning. Instead of going straight into the adjoining room where her desk was, she lingered, slightly irresolute, in the outer office. Once she moved over by Maxwell's desk, near enough for him to be aware of her presence. The machine sitting at that desk was no longer a man. It was a busy New York broker, moved by buzzing wheels and uncoiled springs. "Well, what is it? Anything?" asked Maxwell sharply. He opened mail, lay like a bank of snow on his crowded desk. His keen gray eye, impersonal and brusque, flashed upon her half impatiently. "Nothing," answered the stenographer, moving away with a little smile. "Mr. Pitcher," she said to the confidential clerk, "did Mr. Maxwell say anything yesterday about engaging another stenographer?" "He did," answered Pitcher. "He told me to get another one. I notified the agency yesterday afternoon to send over a few samples this morning. It's 9:45 and not a single picture hat or piece of pineapple chewing gum has showed up yet." "I will do the work as usual then," said the young lady, "until someone comes up to fill the place." And she went to her desk at once and hung the black turban hat with the gold-green macaw in its custom place. He who has been denied the spectacle of a busy Manhattan broker during a rush of business is handicapped for the profession of anthropology. The poet sings of the crowded hour of a glorious life. The broker's hour is not only crowded, but the minutes and seconds are hanging to all the straps and packing both front and rear platforms. And this day was Harvey Maxwell's busy day. The ticker began to reel out jerkily its fitful coils of tape, and the desk telephone had a chronic attack of buzzing. Men began to throng into the office and call him over the railing, jovially, sharply, viciously, excitedly. Messenger boys ran in and out with messages and telegrams. The clerks in the office jumped about like sailors during a storm. Even Pitcher's face relaxed into something resembling animation. On the exchange, there were hurricanes and landslides and snowstorms and glaciers and volcanoes, and those elemental disturbances were reproduced in miniature in the broker's offices. Maxwell shoved his chair against the wall and transacted business after the manner of a toe dancer. He jumped from ticker to phone, from desk to door, with the trained agility of a harlequin. In the midst of this growing and important stress, the broker became suddenly aware of a high-rolled fringe of golden hair under a nodding canopy of velvet and ostrich tips, an imitation sealskin sack, and a string of beads as large as hickory nuts ending near the floor with a silver heart. There was a self-possessed young lady connected with all these accessories, and Pitcher was there to construe her. "Lady from the stenographer's agency to see about the position," said Pitcher. Maxwell turned half around with his hands full of papers and ticker tape. "What position?" he asked with a frown. "Position of stenographer," said Pitcher. "You told me yesterday to call them up and have one sent over this morning." "You are losing your mind, Pitcher," said Maxwell. "Why should I have given you any such instruction? Miss Leslie has given perfect satisfaction during the years she's been here. The place is hers as long as she chooses to retain it. There's no place open here, madame. Countermand that order with the agency, Pitcher, and don't bring any more of them here." The silver heart left the office, swinging and banging itself independently against the office furniture as it indignantly departed. Pitcher seized a moment to remark to the bookkeeper that the old man seemed to be getting more absent-minded and forgetful every day of the world. The Russian pace of business grew fiercer and faster. On the floor, they were pounding half a dozen stocks in which Maxwell's customers were heavy investors. Orders to buy and sell were coming and going as swift as the flight of swallows. Some of his own holdings were imperiled, and the man was working like some high-geared, delicate, strong machine, strung to full tension, going at full speed, accurate, never hesitating, with the proper word and decision, and act steady and prompt as clockwork. Stocks and bonds, loans, mortgages, margins, and securities. Here was a world of finance, and there was no room in it for the human world or the world of nature. When the luncheon hour grew near, there came a slight lull in the uproar. Maxwell stood by his desk with his hands full of telegrams and memoranda, with a fountain pen over his right ear and his hair hanging in disorderly strings over his forehead. His window was open, for his beloved janitress Spring had turned on a lovely warmth through the waking registers of the earth. And through the window came a wandering, perhaps lost, odor, a delicate, sweet odor of lilac that fixed the broker for a moment immovable. For this odor belonged to Miss Leslie. It was her own, and hers only. The odor brought her vividly, almost tangibly, before him. The world of finance dwindled suddenly to a peak, to a speck, and she was in the next room, 20 steps away. "By George, I'll do it now," said Maxwell half aloud. "I'll ask her now. I wonder I didn't do it long ago." He dashed out into the inner office with the haste of a short trying to cover. He charged upon the desk of the stenographer. She looked up at him with a smile. A soft pink crept over her cheek, and her eyes were kind and frank. Maxwell leaned one elbow on her desk. He still clutched fluttering papers with both hands and the pen above his ear. "Miss Leslie," he began hurriedly, "I have but a moment to spare. I want to say something in that moment. Will you be my wife? I haven't had time to make love to you in the ordinary way, but I really do love you. Talk quick, please. Those fellows are clubbing and stuffing out of the Union Pacific." "What are you talking about?" exclaimed the young lady. She rose to her feet and gazed upon him. "Don't you understand?" said Maxwell restively. "I want you to marry me. I love you. Miss Leslie, I wanted to tell you, and I snatched a minute from when things had slackened up a bit. They're calling me for the phone now. Tell them to wait a minute, Pitcher. Won't you, Miss Leslie?" The stenographer acted very queerly. At first she seemed overcome with amazement. Then tears flowed down her wondering eyes. Then she smiled suddenly through them, and one of her arms slid tenderly about the broker's neck. "I know now," she said softly. "It's this old business that has driven everything else out of your head for the time. I was frightened at first. Don't you remember, Harvey? We were married last evening at 8 o'clock in the little church around the corner." The Gift of the Magi has been loved since its first publication. It was one of the stories adapted for O. Henry's Full House, a collection of 5 O. Henry stories, all well told and highly recommended. The film is currently available on YouTube at no charge. You just listened to Dillon's Radio Theater, produced, narrated by Craig K. Dillon. For full access to full productions and the archive, you can subscribe on Substack or Patreon. Links are in the description.